Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel, Jim Reads Too Slow. I'm Jim. Um, and I thought I'd do a quick wrap up of the small amount of reading that I did this past week. Um, I should say, it's 35 degrees. We finally got a little bit of winter. It started out 9 degrees this morning. So it was 71 degrees, 73 degrees as a high a few days ago here. The trade off was that we had 90-mile-an-hour winds and horizontal rain for a few minutes, and then it became winter. So we got that going for us finally. So I'll have a little bit of the Smoky Isle Scotch to keep me warm while I talk about this. So this past week, I finished Mrs. Dalloway, finally. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Modernist classic. It's one of those books that I started earlier in the year and never finished. So I thought it's still sitting there. It's December, and I need to get it read. I'll get it over with. I don't want to say that I let it defeat me. So I started it again with the idea that I was just going to get it over with. And I have to say that I liked it a lot more than I thought I was going to. I fell in love with it, and I had kind of an odd little emotional response at the ending, which I didn't expect at all. So it doesn't have much of a plot. As all of you know who've read it, it takes place over the course of one day, one June day in the 1920s, 1923, somewhere in the early 20s. It starts in the morning with Clarissa Dalloway making plans for one of her parties that evening. She's heading out to buy flowers. There's a parallel story of a World War I veteran suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder who has, by this time, lost his mind and is spiraling towards suicide. Clarissa then gets everything together. She has her party, sees some of her old friends. The end. That's all there is to it, plot-wise. But this is a super dense book. What is really going on is happening in the minds of Woolf's characters, both the main characters and other characters. There's one scene where she's walking through London, and it seems like everybody that she bumps into, we're inside that person's mind. Every person who we see looking up at this airplane, we see into that person's mind and what they're thinking and what their memories are. I heard someone describe Virginia Woolf as the mother of stream of consciousness, and I would not, after reading this, argue with that at all. This book is a sea of memories and regrets and self-doubts and just general thoughts. The characters are very real, though. You can relate to them. You can see them living outside of this book. Like I said, it's just super dense. 194 pages. There's a lot going on here. And I know there are all kinds of things that different people get out of this book, but I saw it as a story of this group of old friends who had known each other since they were very young. They're in their middle age at this point, but they had this time together back in the day, back when they were in their teens, early 20s, when they were all close and they all had hopes and dreams, convictions. They were going to do big things, particularly Clarissa and Sally. They would bounce all of these ideas and things off of one another. They were the best of friends. And this was a special time. It was to the point where even in middle age, this time is constantly on the minds of these people. And then they all just moved off into their own directions. Some of them saw each other once in a while. Some of them stopped seeing the others. Clarissa Dalloway is, as the name of the book would imply, at least half of the main character of this story. She was a member of this group. who ended up choosing the conventional upper class life. This book is also critical of England's class system in the 20s. She compromised herself, those hopes and dreams, to become this snobbish society wife and hostess. Outwardly, it's a shallow life that she chose and that she's living. But inside, it's all struggle and turmoil. Did I make the right choice? Yes, of course I did. But did I really? Why am I going through, why does life feel so empty, so passionless? She's rehashing all of her decisions, assessing her life, and just generally she's having an existential crisis. On the other hand, there's Septimus Smith, who is this veteran suffering from PTSD, or what at the time was called shell shock. Now he's the other half of this main character. Maybe he's the warning of what Clarissa could become if she doesn't get things figured out. The book presents a strong criticism of attitudes toward mental illness. Due to the nature of diagnoses and treatment of mental illness at the time, Septimus is just allowed to deteriorate. He's told there's nothing wrong with him. He's physically fine. Get over it. Lighten up. It's horrific. He's allowed to spiral downward, and we experience his deterioration and his eventual suicide. He doesn't know Mrs. Dalloway or any of the other main characters, although I think we see them seeing him and his wife at various points during the day. Then there's Peter Walsh. He is the lovable screw-up member of the group. He's smart but kind of clueless. He was and still is in love with Clarissa, but she rejected his marriage proposal when they were young. And that sent him on a lifetime course of lamenting that rejection and trying to deal with it through just relationships with other women that have all been, to this point, unsuccessful. He also thinks a lot of himself. He's a little bit creepy, and he constantly is playing with his pocket knife, which is all kinds of weird and symbolic. Then there's Sally Seton. Sally was once the wild free spirit of the group. She spoke her mind. She smoked cigars, it's pointed out. Clarissa had once been in love with her, and she remembers that fondly. Sally seems to have been either from a lower social class or was disadvantaged by a lack of wealth, to the point where another character can take advantage of her back when they were young, and everyone else advises her just to not do anything about it. But she's now Lady Rossiter. She's married to a wealthy man. They live in Manchester, and she has 5 sons. Richard Dalloway is the one who Clarissa chose to marry. He's the straight-laced conservative. He's a member of Parliament, but he's not been overly successful. It's stated several times by various characters that he missed his chance at the cabinet. He seems to be wrapped pretty tight, Richard does. He's against people reading Shakespeare, the sonnets, because they're too trashy, for example. He's so, I guess the word would be repressed. I don't know. He's not even able to tell his wife that he loves her, not even in so many words. So he just gives her a bunch of flowers and expects her to understand, which apparently she does. So at Clarissa's party, all these friends get together. Sally ends up crashing the party because Clarissa didn't invite her. And Clarissa meets each of them, welcomes them warmly, but then spends a lot of her time avoiding them. The party scene is awesome. Clarissa at this party learns of Septimus's suicide from his doctor's wife. The doctor and his wife are at the party. That's why they were late getting to the party. And this affects Clarissa to the point where she goes off into an empty room and thinks about it. She thinks about death, her life. And does she decide to go back to the party and reconnect with her old friends? You know, on this reading, first time I've read it, I think she does. I saw this as having something of a happy ending. Maybe I'll see it differently on a second reading, but it is ambiguous. So what did you all think of Mrs. Dalloway? Please leave a comment. I'll leave it at that because I'm not very good at at reviews. So I can't the deep themes and all of that. Maybe I'll get better at it. But I do love this book, and I'm glad I read it. Glad I decided to go back to it and bring on more Virginia Woolf. I can get into that. So that's the book I finished last week. I'm still reading this guy, Robert Jordan's The Eye of the World. I'll be at that for a while. And I also started reading this, Evelyn Waugh's Beloved One. This is a nice old Dell copy of that. Promises to be hilarious, I hope. So I can't think of anything else. So that'll do it, I guess. Until next time, thanks for letting me waste your time, BookTube.